In 1975, filmmaker François Truffaut brought to the screen a tale of obsession and longing, L'Histoire d'Adèle H, also known as the story of Adele H. With a mesmerising performance by Isabelle Adjani, the film earned her an Academy Award nomination.
Isabelle Adjani in the story of Adele H.
And cemented her place among cinema's great talents. Now, 50 years later, we revisit this extraordinary production, shot largely on the windswept shores of Guernsey. A timeless story, a remarkable performance, and a glimpse behind the lens of one of France's most celebrated directors. For the story of Adele H, he bypassed the bustling film capitals and brought his cast and crew to the Channel Island of Guernsey. It was the first major feature to film here in 2 decades, since Appointment with Venus in 1951 and Above Us the Waves in 1955. Between January and March of 1975, Guernsey's cobbled streets, rugged coastline, and slate-grey skies became a stand-in for 19th century Nova Scotia. A rare moment when world cinema touched these shores. Based on true events, the film tells the story of Adèle Hugo, daughter of the great writer Victor Hugo, whose unyielding passion led her on a perilous journey, far from home.
Et non, surtout ce truc toujours de pas avoir l'air embêté, il faut que ça soit vraiment comme un je sais pas quoi, mais pas que ça fasse contrariété, capricieuse ou... Oh mon Dieu, j'ai oublié mon bâté que j'en vais en prendre qu'une. C'est vraiment colloquial, c'est vraiment...
Oui.
Hein?
Oui. Oui.
Oui. Ok.
I was involved through Gaddock, which was probably or possibly the only drama company in Guernsey at the time.
It was quite exciting. I was away in Oxford studying architecture, and my father called to say, Andrew, they're filming the story of Adele H. How would you like to be involved? Because I've suggested you look like the lieutenant, the star of the show with Isabelle.
I think there was an advert in the press and they were saying they were making a film of Victor Hugo, and did anybody interested in displaying a small dog?
Well, at the time I was a gardener, self-employed gardener, and with a partner who was also, I believe, played some bits of extra in the film, and it was quite a quiet time of year, and so we thought it'd be quite fun to volunteer as extras.
My drama teacher was Margaret McDonough, who was an amazing, magical person on the island for drama, very innovative. And she just put me forward for the role, and because my French wasn't too bad as well, which helped, and it was just a great opportunity.
I'd like to speak to the young lady who lives here.
Oh, Miss Lully, yes, she'll be so... What name shall I say?
Tell her it's her friend from Guernsey who's come to see her.
From Guernsey, yes. Come in, sir, please.
I was employed by personal appointments as a temp, and I was sent to work in the office of Monsieur Truffaut as, I think, a secretary, administrator, and because I spoke some French.
My interest in... I was a member of Gaddock, and we were all invited to go and be extras in Adele H, obviously. And my interest was to see how the famous director, Truffaut, would direct amateurs along with professionals. I really was interested in seeing that.
Well, I think I got involved because my dad was a member of Gaddock, and there's quite a few members of Gaddock got involved with the film, and then sort of by association their children as well.
I've been driving horses and carriages since the early 70s. I was a member of the Guernsey Driving Society, as it was called then. And I think I was involved because I was the only one who had a brougham, which is rather like the London hansom cab, the Victorian cab of the time. So they needed my vehicle, and I was quite happy to do it. But I wasn't quite so happy to be dressed up as an old man, which I was.
It was really through our chief officer of police. He was approached with a view to have the force helping out with road closures and keeping the public away from different scenes that were going to happen. And at the same time, it was mentioned to him that if any of his officers were interested, they required extras for the film. When they said they needed a rowing crew to bring Adele H back from her sailing ship into the port. The whole idea was that she was arriving from a sailing ship into a harbour, I think it was in Nova Scotia. They felt that if they used the Castle Walk down at St. Peterborough Harbour as the arrival place, there were a set of granite steps part of the way along it.
We volunteered and we were told to go down to the little theatre to get fitted out in our uniform. When we got there were more rowers than they needed, so they said, we don't need all of you in the rowing boat. They were going to have to cut down a few of the oarsmen anyway to make way for passengers. And they fitted me out in a big dark coat and a sort of cravat, and I had a big top hat. And I became one of the passengers instead. I think I was sitting in the bow. I think I'm alongside Isabelle, actually. And then we went slightly further, closer to town, on the castle emplacement, and they had set up a desk to look like a sort of customs and immigration type checkpoint, and they had soldiers there. And Mr. Truffaut lined up several of the extras, and he had a piece of card with a sentence written on it, and he went along, read that, next one, read that, and he came to me and he said, read that. And I suppose I was fortunate because he said to me, I like your voice, come with me.
Well, if you had your favours in Liverpool, why haven't you got them now?
Because they were taken away from me when I got to New York.
Then we can't let you
He
know.
gave it to me and he said, there's your script. You've got half an hour, learn that. And then we're starting filming.
We can't let you in.
That. My papers were taken away from me in New York.
They may be in New York, but this is Halifax. And we cannot let you in Halifax unless you've got these papers.
I don't know the rules in New York.
One of the ladies in the film had a little dog under each arm, and they were applying for anyone with a small dog who'd be interested in taking the dog along to be in the film. So I phoned Susan and said, shall we do it?
And all I can really remember is that the dogs had to come downstairs and get out of the way. And I had Honey, and it was needed to get her to go down the stairs, because I think the idea was that she'd been kicked down the stairs to get out of the way. And my brother Nick, he was down at the bottom calling her, but she didn't want to go because she's a little stubborn thing.
So I was also then involved in a scene in the bank where I was supposed to be hiding under a counter, I think. And Adele spots me and comes over and talks to me, asks me my name.
What's your name?
David.
Oh, David. It's a lovely name.
What's your name?
Mine. Mine is Leopoldine.
Subsequently in the scene, I come out from there and they told me to play with an inkwell. It's this old-fashioned metal inkwell with a metal pen and stuff. And I was meant to be playing with that, and then she'd come back up and speak to me again. But I was making too much noise with the inkwell, so they were sort of saying, yeah, play with the inkwell, but don't make any noise with it. It's getting in the way.
I lied to you. My real name is Adele.
She's going to say something to you, and then you watch her as she leaves the bank. And that's what I did. So.
We're going home now, Mr. O'Brien.
was one of the carpenters on one of the film sets in Pedron Street that they were doing.
Good evening, Mrs. Saunders. I have a new lodger for you, a nice young lady.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
We were building a house at Fort George that overlooks the harbour, and they came up one Friday, the boss, it was Mr. Fluckay, the building firm, and asked us all to work all over the weekend to do this film set, and perhaps a little bit into next week to get it ready. So they closed the site down and all the carpenters went down there. Everything had to be done to a specific time. The French polishers were there behind you, covering it all in brown stain and that to make it look authentic. And then we had to panel them all out to make them look like panels. Nothing was straight, nothing was square, but we were told that was fine because it had to look authentic. But it was quite a nice old building. It had like a little courtyard in the front, which I think they did filming there on it as well.
My name is O'Brien. I'm always about if you want me.
Thank you very much.
All right.
I was involved in the arrival into Halifax, and all I had to do was walk down the pier with being escorted by a gentleman, or by Freddie Nash, who was another Gaddock extra, and then the scene at the little theatre.
And now, ladies and gentlemen,
where they were filming the hypnotist act.
Oh, it's a big fake. Yeah, it's a big fake. Get off the stage. You're wrong.
Now, who are you? Why don't you come over here?
And of course it was all, he was a fake, you know, it was all set up beforehand that this chap would come on and do silly things, I think. I'm not sure what he had to do. And then he made a right fool of himself, but it was all part of the act, as you realise later in the film.
Very hot today, Mr. Williams. It's very hot. You can unbutton your coat, Mr. Williams. Now you're right.
I also remember Adele she tapped on somebody's shoulder from Gaddock, Janet MacDonald, to ask her if she could borrow her opera glasses so she could see. And we were recorded. We had to do sound effects, so oohs and ahs, and I don't know if you said bravo, and claps and laughter.
Although I wasn't in the film, my ex-wife was, and my horse, or half of a horse, appeared in the film. It was a horse I owned jointly with a very old friend of mine, who I'm glad to say is still my friend. And the horse appeared in a carriage at the bottom of Hauteville in the film scene, which was purported to be in Nova Scotia. And this was clearly not Guernsey, and the snow was snowing, but of course there's no snow in Guernsey. So the fire brigade came out and squirted foam all over the place to simulate snow.
Voilà, Mademoiselle Lily.
And we went to the actual scene. The officer talked to the film crew and they explained what they would like. So there was a fireman on the actual branch, there was a fireman with the container, and we had to move it around and produce the foam and make sure that it actually didn't blow away and it was the right consistency.
And also there was some of the Canadian scenes were shot a bit further down in what's now the Cock and Ball pub. They turned it into a bookshop, I believe, for the film, and they called it Whistler's Bookshop. And they painted in gold leaf up the door, Whistler's. And for decades afterwards, it became Whistler's Restaurant, a very famous restaurant over here. So that took its name from what the film crew painted on the doors. And we're going past, I used to catch a school bus from Trinity Square, and my friends did as well. So we'd walk down Hauteville, where I lived, down Pedron Street, where the film was being shot, to catch the bus. So we're talking to the film crew on the way, so we got to know them.
Dr. Murdoch, Miss Lully.
Bonjour, Miss Lully.
Bonjour, docteur.
And there's snow coming down in front of the windows. And for some reason, all us small kids at the time had the job to shovel up all what was actually polystyrene granules into black plastic sacks in between each take. The red light would go on when you got to be quiet, red lights off, shovel up all these polystyrene granules, and then two men on scaffolding above would sprinkle it down to the next take. And as we did it more and more, the polystyrene is getting dirtier and dirtier. It was nice and white when we started, it was going quite dark grey by the time we finished.
The scene that I was involved in was shot at what is now called the Cock and Bull. And it was designed to look, I thought, like a library or a bookshop. And I distinctly remember walking in, it was very dark, with a man who was supposed to be my father. I'm pretty sure he was my father. And there was a man up a ladder looking at books, and he was telling me about Adele. And I had to ask him whether she still loved the lieutenant. I remember that very clearly, because I was terrified of the word recollections. And for about 2 days before, I had to practice and practice this one word, because I thought, if I miss a single consonant, I'm going to blow it.
And it created quite a stir in Guernsey at the time. Many of my friends and acquaintances were in the film. Some of the older people who are now no longer with us played fairly prominent roles. Cecil de Sommeray was quite a prominent feature in the film, and his house, Sommeray Manor, which was lived in by his daughter and son-in-law, was used as part of the scenery. Film crew came along and they painted the windows to make them look rotten and old, which of course they weren't, but it was an interesting experience. We did appear in a ball scene, I think. There was a ballroom scene of some sort, it's a vague memory of mine.
We were looking inside into a conservatory, and again it was lit up so well and we could see what was happening, and again we were just in the very long dresses. It was sort of supposed to be a banquet, I think, or something going on, from what I can remember.
And we were all set, some of us in the garden. I was in the garden with a glass of champagne or something, talking to some other people. And Cheryl, my friend Cheryl, was in a window above looking down on the scene. And my husband was based inside in his evening gown suit. And she asked, I presume, she asked him where Lieutenant Pinson was, and he showed her the way, directed there. So he had a nice bit in film.
And the scene was going to be at Plymouth by the Fairy Circle. I still didn't know what this scene was going to be involved, but I knew that I was going to ride Claude, my father's horse. Now Claude was, or Claudius Flavius was his name, was a rather rotund carriage horse, not really used to being ridden, a bit uncomfortable being ridden. And anyway, Dad explained that the director, Mr. Truffaut, wanted us to gallop down from the TV masts. There were 3 others going to follow, and then suddenly abruptly stop in front of Adele, or Isabelle. I didn't give that a lot of thought, but I was a bit concerned. I'm not sure who was most scared, me or the horse. But in that morning, before we actually did the scene, I met Isabelle because we were sitting together in makeup, which is probably my greatest claim to fame. And she asked me what my role was. And I said, my job is to canter down or gallop down and suddenly abruptly stop in front of you. And she was quite concerned because she was going to be standing by the Fairy Circle, but right on the edge, which you will see in the film. and she wasn't particularly confident about horses, and clearly she wouldn't have been confident if she knew I was riding it. And I think she did remarkably well. She was very composed. She was well respected by everybody because I think they all recognised her age. You know, it was a tough job to do.
Join us as we explore the very streets and landmarks where much of the filming unfolded. From the narrow charm of Hauteville, Cliff Street and Padvan Street, from the timeless elegance of Somare Manor, to the town marketplace and library, the enduring presence of Castle Cornet, to the windswept beauty of Plymouth. We'll journey through these iconic locations, as they were in the 1970s and as they stand today, 50 years on.
The whole film was incredible to be able to see all the landmarks that you could identify, but transported to another time. It was really a very special occasion.
Good evening, Mrs. Saunders. I have a new lodger for you, a nice young lady.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
Bonsoir, Madame Saunders. Miss Loulie, voulez-vous partager mon dîner? Mon mari ne sera pas là. Il fait un extra au banquet du cercle militaire.
With the story of Adele H., we see more than just her story captured on screen. We also rediscover Guernsey, its streets, its landmarks, its history, woven into the celluloid of this unique production. And at the same time, it reminds us of how Guernsey continues to benefit from the enduring legacy of Victor Hugo, whose presence gave the island a cultural voice far beyond its shores.
Come in here, Miss.
Yes, I can.
But you must have an appointment
I don't
to see
want
the
an
judge.
appointment.
You
I've
must
got
have
to
an
George.
appointment. Oh, It's all right, Miss Agnes, but there's a young lady down here who wishes to see the judge, but she has no appointment.
Don't make such a fuss. I'll go to my father. I'm sure he'll see her.
Half a century has passed, and yet the story lives on. In the memories of those who were here, participated in the film, in the images preserved on film, and in the character of the island itself.
I got given a Buttons bookshop voucher, which from memory was either 15 or 20 pounds, which in 1974 was huge. And I seem to remember being quite terrified of what I should choose to get for all that money, because that was a lot of books. And I love books, but I have a feeling that I was so anxious about what I would buy, I lost it. And it was signed by François Truffaut, which is a double whammy, really.
Oh, so when we moved into the house, we were interested to find out the history, and we come across some documents which were found for us, and it mentions that the porch, which is currently in front of the house, was actually installed in 1975 for the film by François Truffaut, and the style actually is a Nova Scotian style porch, which of course is relevant to the supposed location of the film, and of course it's wonderful that it's still there today.
I used to drive Isabelle Adjani around a bit in my little MG midget sports car, which was quite fun. I was only 24, she was 18, and I picked her up from here and took her to there, and dropped her off when it was convenient, what they wanted me to do. I remember one quite amusing occasion. I was driving along the Grave, and you know the filter at the top of the Grange? I turned right, and all the people were leaning on their horns as I went up Queen's Road. It was quite funny actually, but I was a bit embarrassed, and she, carrying this very important person in the car with me. You remember things like that, yes.
It was fun, but many years later they'd forgotten that I did it. So it was nice to get this lovely reminder of the 50th anniversary.
The main memory really was at the official function at the Royal Hotel, where we got to chat to her quite a lot. And then a photograph was taken with her and the police rowing team that had brought her in, which appeared in the Guernsey press. She appeared that night a little bit overawed by everything. As you can see in the photograph, if you ever look at it. But no, she was a nice person to deal with. We all had a chat with her. And in fact, the whole film crew that came over couldn't have been nicer people to deal with.
What is your name?
Ralph Williams, Mounted Police.
Now, would you mind repeating this for the public?
Ralph Williams, Mounted Police.
So I was going to go in as an extra, along with everybody else. And Joyce Cook, who was the chairperson of the club, said, no, there's a part you could go for, but for some reason, they want someone to play a Canadian Mountie. You should go for it, because I hear that they want a tall man to do the part. Well, I was 6'1", so I thought, okay. On the other hand, just to make sure, high-heeled boots for men were fashionable at that time, and I had boots with 2-inch heels, so I put them on. So I was 6'3". Great. And I thought that nobody's going to be taller than that. I went to an audition with Truffaut himself and was greeted by his assistant, a charming lady who spoke very good English and who asked me questions about when I would be available for filming and so on. And then Truffaut himself came out of a back room. And I was amazed at how short he was. He couldn't have been 5'3". And he walked up as far as his assistant and stood next to her. And he looked me up and down. Then he said something to her in French that I couldn't understand, turned on his heel and went back into his room. And she said, "I'm so sorry. Monsieur Truffaut finds you too tall for the part." I thought, well, I hope Truffaut got what he wanted, you know.
We all trekked along quite happily when the original screening happened at the Odeon, and were utterly disappointed to find that my moment of glory was obviously on the cutting room floor somewhere, which was really disappointing. But the whole film was incredible to be able to see all the landmarks that you could identify, but transported to another time. It was really a very special occasion.
Yeah, I think I'm very lucky to still be around, to think 50 years on. But I think it's very good for the island because we need all the assistance we can get.
Sadly, and this is very sad, a lot of the people who took part 50 years ago in this film are no longer with us. The key people, the horse driving carriage people. There's no longer a horse driving society in Guernsey. People like Cecil de Sombre of Sombre Manor, with his ear trumpet, and Roger Martin, who played the Doctor. Those people sadly have gone.
Well, I think all the ones that from Gaddock have, except for me, but if you can come up with some other names, that would be wonderful. But as far, I've phoned around a few people and said, were your mum and dad involved? And they can't remember anything about it. So, but I just assumed that they have all passed on, which, 50 years is a long time.
As we honour this remarkable past, we also look forward to the stories still waiting to be told, with Guernsey itself continuing to inspire them. And just as the sea shapes these shores, so too will art and cherished memories carry the island's spirit into the future. That a young girl shall walk over the sea, from the old into the new world, to join her lover, this I shall accomplish.